Body fat can be a soft coating on a hard problem. One woman used body fat as protection. One felt unsafe without it. One was stuck waiting for her life to begin, and another needed it to take up space and be heard. On the surface, they all just look like the same weight problems, but they're not. When body fat is providing unnamed benefits, weight loss efforts are like having one foot on the accelerator and one foot on the brake. The engine is revving, but the car is going nowhere. Listen in to hear the full story. Hi there, it's Bronwyn. Welcome back to Before Dieting. Before I get into today's conversation, I want to take a moment to say thank you to all the women who've been sharing the podcast with friends and people they care about. Because let's be honest, this isn't content you can passively listen to and feel better. It asks you to think and apply it to your own life. And as one of my friends said to me, it's more dental floss than fairy floss. On today's episode, I'll be talking about a topic that's still a work in progress. And it's one of the biggies when it comes to shame. So you need to brace yourself because I'm going to be talking about body fat. And I want to set the tone properly because the word fat carries its own weight. It's one of those words that has been used as a weapon for so long that even hearing it can make your shoulders tighten. So let me set a clear scope about what I mean when I use it. What I'm talking about today is reframing body weight as an integral part of an eating system, not just as the byproduct or consequence of overeating, but when the body fat serves a purpose in its own right. What I won't be talking about in this episode is the judgment piece. That voice that tells you you're a failure, you're lazy, you have no discipline, yada, yada, yada. Let's just put that voice to one side. The first reposition I want to give to body fat is by using its technical name, and that's adipose tissue. So this is the correct name for the stuff that your body has stored as energy. The second reframe is to acknowledge that adipose tissue provides many important functions. It's necessary for regulating hormones. It stores energy for when it's needed. It insulates the body to help maintain temperature. And of course, it cushions your internal organs. Everybody has it. Some of us have a bit more than others. But of course, the other thing we need to be honest about with body fat, and that is it makes us cuddly. Which brings me to my third reframe. The reason I want to talk about body fat today isn't because of how it makes you look or how much of it you have. It's because of what it does from a systems point of view. For women with weight regain, fat isn't just sitting there passively. It's actively helping solve problems and provide benefits that go unnoticed. But as diet culture has a very simple equation, the problem is the fat, and the answer is to get rid of it as quickly as possible, it blocks out all other inquiry. Because everything, every diet, every meal plan, every Monday morning reset has to be locked onto that mission of getting rid of it as quickly as possible. But what if the body fat has a purpose beyond just storing energy? When you look at body fat through a system lens, which is obviously what I do, you have to question whether the fat is a byproduct of an eating system or whether it's an integral part of the eating system itself. Now, you'll recall that the Waiting for Happiness project evolved from conversations that I had with more than 1,000 women. At the time, I tried to group the descriptions about their body weight into some broad categories. But because eating systems are constructed from a woman's history, food rules, and family food culture, it means that every woman's eating system is unique to her. Because eating systems are unique, I had to start thinking about body fat generically. And I came up with this thought that body fat is providing a soft coating on a hard problem. It's where the body fat sits over the top of or wraps around something unresolved or something unprocessed. Now, I'm not suggesting that you consciously think, I'm going to use body fat to do X, X being something where you fill in the blank. That's not how humans or eating systems work. But you might have a sense that your body fat is doing something additional, even if you can't quite put your finger on what. So thanks to COVID for that enforced holiday we all had to take, I had some time to group these body fat patterns into what I call the 4 Ps. Let me walk you through them, keeping in mind that these are not discrete categories. They don't operate like a silo that you live within. They probably overlap, possibly duplicate, and probably even have better names. It's best to think about them as a framework for thinking about body fat. Over time, they may evolve into more accurate naming or even split into more definite categories. And here's where I'd be interested in your thoughts, so please keep in touch. But let me talk about the first P. So the first P I noticed was for protection. And I found this one to be the most common. And it's where fat can provide a physical barrier, emotional distance maybe, or a buffer between you and the world. For some women, that buffer was described in terms of safety, and for others, they described it more about privacy. But then there were others still where it was described as a way of softening the intensity of being looked at or judged or even desired. And I want you to hear from two women on how they describe body fat as part of their eating system. And the first one is Nikki. She had started gaining weight at 13 after she was sexually abused by a minister of religion. Then as an adult, she tried many times to reduce her weight, but never seemed to be able to make any progress. Even after the perpetrator was jailed, her weight struggle still persisted. Well, not surprising. But after working many years on herself, she realised the purpose of the weight was to make herself unattractive and put a barrier, a physical barrier between her and others. She said it was if my body had been trying to protect me in the only way it could, by creating this barrier that I couldn't create for myself. But another conversation comes to mind, and it was one that I had with Gina, and she had a different version of protection. When I spoke with Gina, she described growing up in a household where there wasn't a lot of money. And her mother would say, "We're not rich, but we've always got food on the table." Now, Gina understood that her mother was telling her to focus on the positive. But the only problem was that Gina took this well-intentioned statement as a rule for living that meant she could only choose between money or food. So she chose food. As an adult, Gina was always able to lose weight, but what she lost was always quickly regained. She said when she was at her slimmest, she felt naked and uncomfortable in her body. And then talking further, she said she actually found it terrifying to live without her fat to protect her. She knew that if she was going to let go of her body fat permanently, it was going to take more than a diet. The second P I've called postponement. This one sounds like I'll start dating after I lose weight. For these women, their body fat was keeping them in a holding pattern, a pause button if you like. Or maybe a way of keeping life at arm's length until you feel ready, even if ready never arrives. So here's how Regina described her version of postponement. She said, "I have pent-up energy, craft projects I never start, books I never read, ideas never executed, and weight I never lose. I'm always waiting to get to my future where I think things will be better. I'm stuck in a holding pattern, and while I wait, I eat." So my view is postponement isn't laziness or procrastination. It's a kind of self-protection dressed up as waiting. Let's go on to the third P, which I've named paradox. In this category, there were women wanting to be invisible, to not be looked at or judged, but simultaneously, they were being highly visible because of their body size. It was a kind of the push-pull of don't look at me and everyone's looking at me. In the paradox category, fat becomes both camouflage and spotlight. While paradox may seem confusing, it's actually trying to solve two competing needs at once. And when I think of paradox, Rosalind comes to mind. She was a teacher at a technical college and spent her working days in front of students. Her solution to not drawing attention to her increasing weight was to upsize her clothing and wear oversized glasses to cover herself up. You can see the problem. I started to think the clothing answer to the paradox category might be called the caftan cover-up. I then defined the fourth P, which is projection. And this one seemed to be about presence, authority, and taking up space. And to give you an example, I want to tell you about Lola. For the first 4 years of her life, she had a life-threatening illness that left her a miniature version of her siblings. While her height was affected by her illness, her intelligence certainly wasn't. She went on to become a lead scientist in her field, managing a team of 20 scientists, all of them men. She said due to her height, she had always had to fight for attention and to be heard. And when she was over trying this diet and that, she decided to turn her scientific brain onto herself. And the first thing she noticed was as her responsibilities at work grew, so did her body fat. And she said to me with complete honesty, I had a flash of insight where I realised I couldn't grow any taller to have authority, so the only way to have presence and take up space was to expand. My overeating was the way that I achieved that. Now, this framework that I'm putting forward doesn't suggest that one of these neatly explains your experience. We're all far more complex than that. And it might be that women have a blend of these P's shifting over time, depending on what life's thrown at them. But what I am suggesting is this, that if fat is serving a purpose, if it's doing a job, if it's solving a problem, then try to remove it without understanding its function becomes incredibly difficult. Because with eating systems, if the body fat is serving a known or even an unknown purpose, removing it creates a gap. And unless that gap is identified and an alternative found, then the system will refill that gap, which in our case means the weight returns plus some. And this is where systems thinking becomes important. Most women are trying to solve the visible problem, the number on the scale, the size of their body, the way their clothes fit. But with complex problems, the visible part is rarely the root cause. The visible problem is usually the outcome or symptom of the root cause. And when you focus only on solving the symptom, you're not looking deeper to the underlying structure that's causing it. And when body fat is seen as having a purpose rather than the result of dieting failure, then it becomes less about fighting the fat and more about understanding what it's been doing on your behalf. Now, I know that even thinking about the role of body fat can be uncomfortable and can set off those yappy critical voices. But it's by asking the root cause questions that you open the door to permanent change. Because body weight is not about laziness or personal failure. In my experience, eating systems at their core are all about survival. So even if we can set aside the shame and consider that maybe, just maybe, you and your body have been doing the best you can to survive, then that's a really important reframe. So to finish up, I want to leave you with a short exercise, one that can give you an entry point into a conversation with yourself about body fat minus the shame. So take a moment to picture your body fat as like a savings account. It's the accumulation of all that savings you've built up over years, and now you can spend it on anything you want. Now ask yourself, what would you spend those savings on? What would you have? And the second question is, what would you have to change if you no longer could rely on those savings? If you try this exercise, I'd really love to hear what you find. And if you would like a copy of the 4 Ps, send me an email at hello@waitingforhappiness.com.au. Let me know what came up for you, and in return, I'll send you a copy of the 4 Ps. And before you go, if you can, please press that button to subscribe or leave a review. It really will invite more women into these shame-free conversations about weight. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk with you next week.